They were just boys, teenagers in uniform, raised to study, to obey, to serve their nation, not to fight, not to die. But on a smoky hill above Mexico City, they stood their ground and made a decision that would echo through centuries. This is the story of Los Niños Héroes, the children who chose death over surrender. The war was already lost. In 1846, the United States had invaded Mexico. 1 year later, American forces had marched hundreds of miles, capturing port cities and crushing resistance along the way. Now in September of 1847, they were closing in on the capital. Mexico's army was fractured, its people exhausted, its leaders divided. And yet, between the U.S. Army and Mexico City, stood one last stronghold, Chapultepec Castle. An old Spanish fortress turned military academy, Chapultepec sat on a hill overlooking the heart of the nation. It was more symbol than strategy, more school than fortress. Inside, a few hundred soldiers, scattered officers, and dozens of young cadets. Most were barely old enough to shave. They trained with rifles, but had never seen war. They wore boots, but still lived like boys. When the generals looked at them, they saw students, expendable, replaceable. But history had other plans. On the morning of September 12th, the silence broke. American cannons thundered across the valley. Shells tore into the walls of the castle. Dust clouded the sky. The hill shook. And still, the boys stood at their posts. By the next morning, over 7,000 U.S. troops began their advance. They climbed the hill with grappling hooks and ladders, firing as they rose. The defenders? Fewer than 800. No reinforcements. No mercy. Among the chaos, 6 young cadets made a choice: to stay. Their names became legend. Juan de la Barrera, the oldest at 19, son of a general. Juan Escutia, Agustin Melgar, Francisco Marquez, Fernando Montes de Oca, Vicente Suarez, all between 13 and 17. They weren't ordered to hold the line. No one expected them to die. But they believed in something greater than survival. Not in the victory of Mexico, but in the dignity of standing firm while others fled. The fighting was brutal. Staircases ran with blood. Walls splintered. Smoke twisted through the halls of the academy. Francisco Marquez, just 13, was shot defending a hallway with nothing but a bayonet. Vicente Suarez, barely taller than his rifle, was killed atop a staircase, trying to protect a wounded soldier. Agustin Melgar barricaded himself in a classroom. Wounded, alone, he held until the end. One by one, they fell. But not a single one retreated, and then, the flag. As the Americans overran the final defenses, one cadet, Juan Escutia, climbed to the ramparts. He saw the Mexican flag, tattered, proud, still flying. He knew what its capture would mean, what the symbol would say if it was taken. So he tore it down, wrapped it around his body, and jumped. He didn't shout. He didn't wait. He simply fell, a human banner crashing into eternity. By midday, Chapultepec had fallen. Mexico City surrendered soon after, and the U.S.-Mexican War came to a bitter end. But something strange happened. The story of the 6 boys spread, not just among Mexicans, but eventually across borders, across time. Because in a war filled with loss, they had given something back. A reason to remember. A reason to grieve with pride. They didn't win, but they reminded their country how to stand. 100 years later, in 1947, U.S. President Harry Truman visited their monument. He stood at the base of 6 towering marble columns, each one bearing a name. He laid a wreath, and he said, "Bravery is not the property of any one nation." He wasn't wrong. The boys had faced the might of an empire, not with triumph, but with conviction. They weren't warriors when the sun rose, but they were legends by the time it set. Can you imagine being 14 and choosing death over escape, choosing duty over breath? They didn't hold the castle. They didn't win the battle. They didn't live to see what came next. But what they did that day, what they chose in those final moments, became something no army could erase. And today, at the foot of Chapultepec Hill, 6 columns stand like sentinels, silent, immovable, each one carved with a name, each one a reminder. that even in defeat, a single act of courage can shape a nation's soul.